Barrels and Brews here in Chaffee Crossing recently went out of business. It was sold. And that made me ask, why would someone buy a failing business? Why would somebody buy a business that, as far as I can tell, has been losing money for years? Why would that be valuable? The rumor is Barrels and Brews closed permanently. The business, inventory, and liquor license were sold to another liquor store. Most of the employees were laid off, and their retail space is now vacant. The rumor is that the buyer does not plan to keep the Chaffee store open, but instead wants control of just the liquor license. And if that's really what happened, the buyer's purchase of a failing business is rational. I think a liquor license has two different numbers attached to it. One number is the price. That's what the government charges. In Arkansas, the state retail liquor permit fee is like $400 per year. That's the price. But the second number is the value. That is what the license is worth in the secondary private market. And in the case of liquor licenses, those numbers must be drastically different because the number of licenses is limited. Arkansas law limits liquor permits to one permit for every 7,500 people in the county or political subdivision. So if you control one of those licenses, you do not just control permission to sell liquor, you control one of the scarce slots. And if nobody else can easily get a new slot, then your license has market value beyond the annual fee. It's like if the city only allowed a limited number of food trucks or taxis or parking permits or vendor booths at a festival. At that point, the permit itself becomes valuable, not because the paper's special, but because the paper lets you do something other people are legally excluded from doing. Economists call that difference between price and market value economic rent. It's not rent like what you pay your landlord every month. Economic rent means money you can collect because you control something scarce. Most businesses profit because they make something better than their competitors, or they work harder, or they serve their customers more efficiently. A normal business earns money by doing useful things. And a liquor store can absolutely be productive. It has to buy inventory, manage cash, check IDs, hire employees, clean the space. That is productive profit. But if the store itself is losing money while its license appreciates, then we have to ask a different question. Did Barrels and Brews create the value of the license? Maybe, sort of, in the sense that they acquired it and operated under it. But did they create the scarcity? Did they earn the scarcity value, the economic rent, from their liquor license? Absolutely not. The license's scarcity was created by public policy. The public created a rule that says only so many licenses can exist. Then the private market capitalized that scarcity into the value of the license. So if someone buys the store mainly to control the license, the value they're buying is not better service or better management, it's the value of exclusion. Let's use fake numbers to make the concept visible, so this isn't a claim about this specific transaction, just some hypothetical math. Suppose a liquor store sells for $200,000, and the store is not profitable. Maybe it loses $50,000 a year. The fixtures and the inventory inside are worth something, but the business operation is not the valuable part. If a license is worth $200,000 and the buyer wants a 10% return, then the license is implicitly worth about $20,000 a year. Not because the state charges $20,000, the state only charges $400. The $20,000 value is the annualized private value of controlling that scarce slot. So the official fee is not the economic value of the liquor license, the economic value comes from scarcity. And if that scarcity is created by law, then the public in general is who created the scarcity and gave the liquor license its true value. When the government creates scarcity, that scarcity has value. And if the government gives away the scarce permission for $400 a year, but the market values it much higher, then that difference becomes private wealth. And Arkansas does seem to recognize that this can happen. State rules say that if a permit holder doesn't conduct business for 30 days, the permit goes into an inactive status, and maybe eventually the license can be re-granted to someone who intends to use it. But even with that recycling mechanism in place, the scarcity of these licenses makes them incredibly valuable for private interests. If a liquor license is actually worth $20,000 a year because the public limits its supply, and the public creates that value, then I think the public is deserving of some sort of return on the value it creates. That could mean higher annual fees for liquor licenses, or charging more for inactive permits, or I'm partial to the idea of auctioning off licenses instead of charging a flat fee. Without charging the market value for these licenses, the state is essentially giving away an enormous windfall to a limited number of individuals. It is a subsidy. That's why Barrels and Brews rationally stayed open for so many years without turning a profit, because they were making money on the back end through license appreciation created for them by the public. So you might ask, wouldn't increasing the price of liquor licenses from $400 a year to $20,000 a year make it so much more expensive to operate a store? And wouldn't liquor stores have to raise prices to make up for that huge increased cost of running their business? And no, I don't think so. And that's because the scarcity of the license, the expensive part, is already baked into consumer prices. After all, who paid Barrels and Brews for their license? It was another liquor store. They already paid the high price for the license. It was just a private party instead of the public who got to realize the appreciation. And you might be wondering, if the buyer paid $200,000 or whatever for a license, and its competitors didn't get their license on the secondary market, they're only paying $400 a year, can't competitors just lower their prices and force Eastside Liquor to price in its more expensive liquor license to customers? And my answer to that is yes, maybe to an extent. But the value of the license that Eastside Liquor bought, the price that they paid to a private secondary market, already factored in that risk. If they would have had to meaningfully increase prices over their competitors to afford the license, then they wouldn't have paid the price that they did for the license. It might have only been worth $5,000 maybe, or maybe it would have only been worth $800. Whatever the price is, the value of the license is the maximum amount that the buyer can buy it for while still being able to maintain their business against competitors. So the high value of liquor licenses, whatever that amount is already embedded into consumer prices in the larger market as a whole. And as such, the state can probably charge much more money for liquor licenses without passing those costs on to consumers. And there are other examples of things like liquor licenses that work the same way. The radio spectrum only has so many usable frequencies, so the price of a radio license and its value could be two different amounts. Or airport landing slots. There's only so many spaces where planes can park at busy airports. And the example we're all more familiar with might be concert tickets. If the number of tickets is fixed and the demand for a show is high, private interests swoop in and capture the gap between face value and market value of these tickets. Invoking our liquor license example, the venue owner for concert tickets is essentially acting like the state of Arkansas does for liquor licenses. The venue owner created the scarcity of the tickets by only building a limited number of seats and then booking a desirable music act that can fill all those seats. But when the secondary market values the tickets higher than the price charged by the venue owner, the private interests fill the gap. We call that scalping. Scalpers don't earn the appreciation of those tickets, the venue owner and the musical performer did. And in fact, by purchasing a large number of tickets, as many as possible, their appreciation gets even higher because there are fewer tickets available for everyone else. In this way, scalpers gain appreciation by taking something away from everybody else. It is just like a subsidy. And when it comes to cities like Fort Smith, the big example of subsidies is land appreciation. Land is the ultimate scarce asset. You can build more buildings, you can open more businesses, hire more workers, make more inventory, but you cannot create more downtown Fort Smith. And the value of that land is not created only by the landowner. It's created by the public. Streets, sidewalks, utilities, police, fire, other businesses, housing, airport access, local laws, population growth, traffic numbers. The landowner doesn't have any impact over any of these things, but it appreciates the value of the land. And the appreciation of land, like liquor licenses, is created by the public in general. Can we agree that the owner of a vacant lot is not doing any work? They're not farming the land, they're not building housing or factories, and they're certainly not performing any labor. But nevertheless, their vacant lot becomes more valuable over time despite its owner not performing any work. It's not the vacant landlord creating that appreciation, it's the public around him, and yet he profits. It's another subsidy. And just like we can increase liquor license fees without passing costs on to consumers, we can also charge for public services like police and fire without passing costs on to consumers as well. If the public spends $400 on police service for a parcel, and that parcel's value increases by $500 as a result, then the landowner is gaining a $100 subsidy. The public can charge him $100 and he doesn't lose any money. He's simply losing a subsidy. That $100 is new wealth created by the public and can be used towards more public goods. Or it can even be given back to citizens in a cash payment, what some people call a citizen's dividend. And it is a dividend because the general public contributed $400 of equity into police service, the police used that equity to create $500 in wealth, and the $100 difference left over is profit to be given back to shareholders. Cities like Fort Smith try to recoup the cost of things like police using a sales tax, and there's some merit to that. The police facilitate safety that allows shops to make more sales, which on the back end funds police. But it's extremely inelegant. Only shops fund the police, yet we all benefit from them. I've been an accountant for private, city-like places for about 14 years, and I think there's something to learn from the private sector. In shopping malls, airports, and lifestyle centers, we bill for security service based on square footage. And if our security does a super good job and increases the value of a unit, we can increase the rent. It's new wealth, and we distribute the earnings of that new wealth to our shareholders. In a city, our shareholders are the residents, and we could give that wealth back in the form of infrastructure maintenance, like higher quality police and fire equipment, or maybe even cash dividends. If SJR 15 passes later this year, Arkansas may have a new framework doing just that. SJR 15 allows for the creation of economic development districts within cities. If that creates enough flexibility, I want Fort Smith to explore a special economic development zone downtown. The idea would be simple. Stop taxing the things we want more of, like buildings and sales, and only tax the things that nobody can create more of. Land. Make it revenue neutral. If someone owns an active storefront, maintains a building, leases space to local businesses, builds housing, or improves a property, they wouldn't be punished for being productive. And in fact, we'd be one of the only places in the entire country where you can make productivity tax-free. This would attract outside investment. But if someone owns a vacant building, a surface parking lot, or an underused parcel in the heart of downtown, they shouldn't be rewarded for waiting while everybody else approves the neighborhood around them. The idea is to reward people for building and reward businesses for operating and stop taxing transactions and improvements so heavily. And when land values rise because of the community, let the community recover more of that value. This is the only tax that is both pro-business and pro-production. It says, earn money by doing something useful, and we will pay you back for it. And that brings me back to the closed liquor store. This little Chaffee example may not be perfect. The facts surrounding this may be more complicated. The law might limit how long a license can sit inactive. The buyer may have perfectly reasonable plans I don't know about. But as a teaching example, it helped me see something. Sometimes the most valuable part of a business is not the business, it's the permission slip that it gains from the public. And sometimes that permission slip is valuable because the public made it scarce. And when the public creates scarcity, the public should recapture that value. That is the conversation I want Fort Smith to have. Not just about liquor licenses, but about land downtown and vacant buildings and surface parking. About whether our tax system rewards work, investment, and productive use, or rewards people for sitting on scarce assets while the rest of the city does the work around them.